Here we are back with another Snow-Only podcast. We're looking at the costs of buying ski real estate in France. Today we have James Ross, who is the sales specialist, shall we call you, from Erna Low Property, specialising in the ski properties in France and south of France. Is that right, James?
That's it, Mark. Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too. So we're going to cover the costs of buying ski property in France. Before that, James is going to give us a little bit of a background on your experience, a little bit about your company and what you do there. Over to you, James.
Sure. No, thanks, Mark. So I've been in French property, working a lot in ski property for over a decade now. So I've seen a lot of changes. We've been through a lot of interesting times over the last decade or so. But it's still a great investment for the right property in the right area. It's fantastic developments going up all the time. So, that's why speaking to having an agent, speaking to the right people, making sure, you're dealing with people that, you trust and you rely on to give you the right advice is very important at the moment. Erna Low Property as a company has a fantastic heritage. We've been around as a company since 1932. Originally started out as a ski tour operator, and then the property arm of that has been around for over 20 years now, because a lot of our clients, we go skiing, stay in these fantastic properties in the French Alps, and then want to buy a similar property. So they would come to us and we would help them out. So our heritage is long. We've got a great trusted client base. And what you get from us is a very, I would say, unique experience, buying from a small family company, who, you get trust implicitly from the beginning, and we hold our clients' hands right from the beginning, right through to the end. I mean, we have clients that we speak to 5 years later, whenever they want to sell their property, they always come back to us because they know the service they get is one which is just going to be reliable and trustworthy.
Perfect, James. James, just while we're chatting about it, which areas do you tend to specialise in French Alps?
So we've got an office, Mark, in Les Arcs 1950, which is a very strong base of ours. So a lot of our business, a lot of our clients come through there. Francois Marchand, the owner of the company, he specializes in Les Arcs 1950. It's a very unique village, beautiful village, built by Intrawest in the early 2000s. And that basically, they went to Walt Disney really to come up with the perfect ski village. And so Disney designed this village. They tweaked it a little bit, of course, but it's a beautiful, beautiful ski destination and great skiing. And, very high parody ski area is huge. So unique proposition in Art 1950, which, Francois Marchand would love to talk to you about one day.
Yeah. Which other areas? That's where your office is. Which other where do you have new developments, etc.?
Sure. So all the classic main ski areas. So within the parody ski, Port de Soleil has always been a strong base of ours. Maribel, the Courchevel as an area of ours, which we always want to get into. Slightly different proposition, but we have an apartment there at the moment. Teen de Brevier, we had a big development there. There's some apartments coming back, but really all over the French Alps. We've got many developments close to airports, a bit further along. So whatever our clients want, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to find the right property for them.
Good. Okay, let's get into it, James. So I think what we'd like to establish here, so imagine that we're talking to someone that is just starting out on their ski property search. They're doing a bit of research, maybe they've found. If we stick to new developments to start with, I think it's an important message just to give people what the associated costs are of purchasing a property. Obviously, if you find a property that you like, what are the costs? What are any hidden costs? What are the costs based on? I know that we have, in case people want to reclaim the VAT, or are there any penalty costs, etc.? So I guess the first question would be, if we're looking at new developments, and maybe we can just compare resales afterwards, but from a new development, what are the costs of purchasing a property in a new development?
Sure. So there are certainly advantages to purchasing a new build property in France. And that's essentially the property purchase tax you pay at the outset. So no land tax, stamp duty. In France, the equivalent here are the notary fees. So for new build property, that's between 2.5%. And that's essentially all your legal fees and your property taxes rolled into one. So your notaire will obviously take a cut of that, and then the government they'll take a cut as well, and it's split up between different areas, departments. But essentially, no more than 2.5% of the purchase costs, including VAT. That's what you're going to pay for your property. So different to the UK, when you're paying 5%, pushing the boundary up as you go towards £1 million. So very much lower in France from the outset for new build property compared to the UK.
And this is irrelevant as to the cost of the property, whether it's 250,000 or 10 million, still 2.5%, 2.5%.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. 2.5%. I mean, once you get into, over 1.3 million, you get into a wealth tax. But let's not get into that now. I'm sure that's for another time.
Yeah.
But yes, so the outset from the beginning of property purchase for new build 2.5%.
And there's no additional hidden costs, no nothing. You wouldn't find someone then sending you a bill for another percent that's kind of come from somewhere. That is it. Blanket statement, 2.5%.
That's it. 2.5% notary fees. If you're getting a mortgage, that's slightly different. And perhaps let's not get into that now because there's a few costs, associated costs, and it probably needs another podcast on its own. But so your stamp tax, land duty equivalent, notary fees, 2.5% for new build property. That's it.
So one thing you mentioned earlier, which was 2.5% based on the property price plus VAT. Now, just to answer the question, I know that you can reclaim the VAT, but if you put it into a rental, so the 2.5% is based on the plus VAT and not after you've deducted the 20%.
That's right. So it's always based on the purchase price, including VAT. Because a lot of the time the property won't be eligible, or the owner won't want to reclaim the VAT. So just on that, if that's all right, Mark. So if you're buying a property in the French Alps and you want it as your second home, so obviously you're not going to live there, and you want it as a rental to give you income to pay for the mortgage, the charges, etc., then you can reclaim the VAT. Now, this can only be done on new build properties, and it's from the outset. So it can't be lived in from day one and then you reclaim it. So you reclaim the VAT right from the beginning. Relatively simple. All you need to do is to have a rental mandate with an organization or a local company who will take on the rental management of that property. And you need to provide three things. And that would essentially be the cleaning of the property, the linen change, and a key handover. And you get a certificate, if you like, from the rental company contract. You send that to the French government, showing that your property is a rental, and the French government will reimburse you the 20% VAT you paid on purchase. Now, they do this because France is obviously a huge tourist destination, not only for foreign nationals, but most French people would go on holiday in France, certainly go skiing in France. Why wouldn't you? And so the French government is allowing you to reclaim the VAT by rewarding you for making your property a rental property, because they want beds. They want beds to encourage rental, boost the local economy. And so it's a win-win for everyone. So great system. Many of our clients do it. And essentially, if you're only going to use the property 2-3 times a year, why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah, actually, I do have a quick cost. This is a little bit off topic, but I will ask it. If you take a developer that has a compulsory leaseback, let's say, that allows you for an allocated certain amount of weeks, and you basically lease it back to them as a developer. If you get a local rental agent, because we've had a few people ask us this, if you get a local rental agent and you said you've got the mandate, and as long as it covers the criteria for you to then reclaim the VAT, how negotiable is that mandate with them that allows you to use it for as much as you like? What are the terms of being able to reclaim the VAT? Could you then still take your 4 or 5 weeks in the high season?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so if you're buying,
you know what I mean? Because obviously a leaseback is very much like you get 1 week allocated here and 1 week for high season, and then you get 6 weeks in low season or something along those lines. But obviously there's that grey area of flexibility that people want, that say, I'd like to use some more time in the high season, but I'd still like to reclaim the VAT. So how does that work exactly?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a good question. So, I mean, we don't tend to deal with a lot of leasebacks anymore. The model's slightly changed, but certainly, if you buy a property with a leaseback company, very difficult to change out of that arrangement with them. Once you're in it, you're in it really, and you got to sort of run with it. So, the model. I'm not sure if some do, but some perhaps would do this, where you have an allocation of weeks per year. It could be 2 weeks in high season, medium, low, etc. And then it's how you square the circle, if you like, with your own usage and the rentals. Obviously, the more you use the property, in the high season, the lower your rent's going to be, and vice versa. So it can be quite rigid if you, from the outset, with a leaseback company. If you bought a property which was a standard property, it's called a classic freehold in France, just normal property, and then you put it up for rental management leaseback, if you like, but it's private, your own. You're just you're an individual doing it with a rental management company in, say, Chamonix. Then there's no real restrictions on how you're going to use it. So you can use it, quite a lot if you like. But obviously, the more you're going to use it, certainly in the high weeks, the less rental you're going to get. Stipulation really is that you can't use it for more than 6 months, because then in the eyes of the French fat man, it's your main residence and not a second home. So so you wouldn't be able. So there would be an issue with the VAT you reclaimed, excuse me. So, obviously, a rental management company would want to, rent it for as much as they can, because obviously they're getting a cut of it. So there would be a negotiation, but it's quite fluid. It's not restrictive, and you could have really as much use as you want. But how much skiing can people really go when they've got jobs and families? But what it does give you is flexibility.
Yeah. What are the? Let's get back to the costs. What are the costs of if you were using a local rental management company? What are the costs associated with them, and what are the ongoing costs of your property?
So there would be a fee to the agent, and this could vary, varies in how you do it. I mean, it would change from agent to agent. It can be anything from, say, 20-25% up to higher than that, 40%. But it again, this is all part of how you negotiate it. If your property is very, very desirable, then you may have agents falling over you to rent your property. So, but it's all a negotiation, and we would very much help you with that. We wouldn't just walk away once we've sort of you bought the property through us and then you're on your own. No, we would help you set up the rental mandate. We'd introduce you to the right rental companies. to make sure you're with companies which are going to look after you.
Just costs of running the property. What do you have? General water, electricity?
Yeah, so the same as you'd have here. So, service charge. I've always found that, we're slightly different, but, at flats I've lived in London, the service charge can be, sometimes eye-wateringly high, but very much less in France. So for let's say a good 2-bed in a good resort, your service charge can be anything from some 1,500 to 2,500 euros a year. So a lot less than perhaps the equivalent in the UK. You would have water, gas, electricity, Wi-Fi on top of that. Again, just how it's done in France. Your costs for those, I don't think it's any secret, the energy costs in France are lower than in the UK. Wi-Fi tends to be lower, water tends to be lower, even though they've had to engineer everything into these resorts. With the infrastructure, it's still lower than in the UK. So it's very manageable. And if you've got a good rental and you're not using it all the time, but you're still getting some good use out of it, during high season, you should be able to get a nice return from it. Certainly cover your mortgage and certainly cover your costs.
Yeah. Just a quick one. I don't know whether what it's the equivalent in France, but is in your one, say, to 2,500. Who looks after the common area of the building if you're in an apartment? Is there a common area charge?
Yeah, so it's essentially it's a syndic. So there's no thank goodness. So there's no leasehold in France. It's just freehold co-ownership. So if there's a development and there's 20 apartments in there, you would be, and you bought one, you would be have 1/20 of the co-ownership. And then every year there's an AGM, and all the owners vote through whatever it is, whether to lower the service charge, put it up, change things. So it's very democratic the way they do it. But essentially, there's a syndic, these companies who manage that, and then they become the management companies. So you have conversations with them. It's very transparent. But it's not, certainly from my experience, owning leasehold properties in the UK, it can be quite opaque in how it's done. You have, you have no ownership. The leasehold it's in freeholds are sort of quite archaic, aren't they? So in France, you're much more involved with the company who's managing it, and you have a say in what happens.
Yeah. Well, what's the associated cost? So if we understand the purchase costs, we understand the running costs. What are the costs if people want to sell their property? And is there any penalties if people want to sell early, or if people want to flip properties before the development's even finished? What's the cost associated with that?
Yeah, sure. So in France, the buyer always pays the notary fees. So as a seller, your buyer is going to be paying them for you. So it's to not really have any penalties and to stop properties being flipped. It's 5 years. So you really need to own the property for 5 years. And once you've owned the property for 5 years, then there are no. This is essentially to the French government to stop people flipping properties and making sure that they're owning it for the appropriate period of time. But after 5 years, there's nothing on the owner to sort of have any penalties. If you put it into a rental management property, that's slightly different, because a rental management property, once you reclaim the VAT, you need to own the property for 20 years. Once you own the property for 20 years, then under the eyes of the French government, you've sort of earned, you've earned that 20% VAT that you got back. But if, say, you sold the property after 5 years and I bought it, well, I would just buy it with the rental management and the VAT obligations. So then I would have 15 years to go until I wouldn't have to pay any VAT back. So so selling the property, there's no real fees on that apart from with your agency fees, and that in France is slightly higher than the UK, but it's negotiable. But anything between 4 or 5%, something like that.
Yeah, and so just to touch on it, James, if you wanted to then sell it before 5 years, if you needed to sell it, are there any penalties? What's the situation there?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, that's the capital gains tax in France. So if you sell it before 5 years or ownership, you have to pay full capital gains tax. But after 5 years, it's then on a sliding scale up to 22 years. So the longer you own the property, the less capital gains you pay.
Yeah. Understood. So let's just kind of flip over to, I know just there's always that a resale purchase because the notary fees are slightly higher. If you're buying a resale property, what's the fees on that one in comparison to the 2.5%?
Yeah, sure. So it's slightly higher in France for property over 5 years old. So you're looking at between 7 and 9% for notary fees, and again that covers your legal fees and your property taxes. So clearly there is a big difference there, which again is why it's quite it makes new build properties quite attractive, which is a lot of the stuff we do. I know British international buyers, when they're looking at that, they sort of God, that seems like a lot. It's just how it is. The home market, the French, they're very used to it. That's how it works, the system. But essentially, it's reduced. The notary fees are reduced to new build properties to sort of boost the economy, get it going. But they're the advantages which we've spoken about. So there is a slight difference there, but nothing you can do about it. It's just the way it is.
But that's the only difference between obviously new build and resale properties is the notary fees. There's no difference in ongoing costs after that.
No, that's it. It's just the notary fees, which and I should say when you're buying a property, again different to the UK. Where the price, you can negotiate the price. In France, and this is just a cultural thing, it's how it's always been done. The price is not always, but it's fixed, and that's the price. But then you can negotiate on the notary fees. So you can, with new build properties, a lot of the time you get notary fees thrown in as part of the deal, and then with secondhand resale properties. Obviously, that's a lot, but then you can sort of look at the price if you're paying such high notary fees. So it sort of flips, if you see what I mean. So they sort of work. You can work it to your advantage to get a deal on the property in both scenarios.
Yeah. I've just thought of something, and I'm sure people are now going to think exactly the same thing as I do. When you say, obviously, for a resale properties, that anything over 5 years in terms of selling is a 7 to 9% notary fee, and a new build property is 2.5%, then obviously when you go to sell it 5 years later, then you have the 7 to 9% notary fees.
Well, yes. I mean, but that's they're going to. They're straight to the French government. They're taking their cut of that.
But that would be the situation if it's over 5 years. If you hold the property for, then the notary fees are substantially increase.
It's just over 5 years. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a significant difference, isn't it? If you're looking at something around 500,000 at 2%, that's 510,000, including notary fees. If you do it the other way around, of a resale property at 500,000, it's 545. That's 35 grand difference.
Yeah, it does. It's a huge difference, which is why generally the British tend to buy Not always, but certainly, our market, it's new build properties, just because of the advantages, get the VAT back, the lower notary fees. But then in Art 1950, where we have an office and we do a lot of sales, obviously that was built 20 years ago, and you're paying higher notary fees, but a different proposition. This is ski in, ski out, ski through the village. You can get very good property deals there, and as I said, you can use the notary fees to negotiate on the price, to get a figure that's going to work for you.
Do you find that from a sales perspective that's quite a good selling point? The fact that there are a lot of people buying new developments because of the low notary fees and the fact that you can reclaim the VAT. That as we said, if you look at 500,000 up to 510,000, including notary fees, but 20% back of that's 100 grand, give or take, right? That makes something very affordable when people are kind of like, they have a budget that they're trying to stick to.
Sure.
Versus 500,000 on a resale, 550, which is not really negotiable.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, a lot of the time people come to us and they don't really know or fully appreciate the VAT rebate option. So that comes as a nice surprise. And also the notary fees, again, they can be in the dark about that. So when you sort of talk about it, it makes it much more attractive. So, but it's really, horses for courses, Mark, depending on what you want, whether you want a brand new build, you want to rent it, you want to get the VAT back, works for a lot of people, as an investment for sure. And then, like I said, ARC 1950, where we do a lot of resales. Yes, the notary fees are more expensive, but it's a very established village. The rentals are very high there. So when you're looking at a yield, you've got a solid yield. You've got a property. You've got a property and a resort that's super popular, not going anywhere. So you're buying into the investment. It might cost you more initially, but in the long run, it's probably going to work out or potentially work out better for you. So, do your research. That's why people come to us. We run through all the scenarios, all the options, so they're very comfortable with what they're buying, whether that's a new build or a secondhand resale property. Yeah.
Well, my son has been skiing 3 times now. He's 8.5, and his favorite place so far is Les Arcs.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's no secret that snow's hasn't been fantastic, certainly this year. And Les Arcs 1950 is obviously 1,950 meters, and then you just go straight up from there. Paradis Ski is absolutely huge, over to La Plagne, and then down to Champigny and Vanoise. So, look, I mean, you can't really go wrong with it. It's got it all.
I've just got a couple more questions to ask you, James. It's on the lines of obviously the purchase and costs. What's the typical time in terms of agreeing a price and completion for people?
Yeah, so I mean that again, that can vary. So with new builds, so a lot of the stuff that I do, it's off plan. So essentially from the beginning, you're looking at very very pretty pictures. The CGIs these days are terrific, but you're buying into the idea of the development and the area, location, and the plan of your apartment. So once you've negotiated the price, which we will help you to do, and you've agreed it, depending on where you are in the build, I mean, you could be 3 years out, 2 years out, or a year out. It really depends. But if you're purchasing this cash from agreeing the price and then to signing the contract, well, this could be over 2 or 3 months, perhaps.
2 or 3 months. Okay, standard
for a cash buyer. Mortgages can take longer, up to 6 months, and then depending on when you're doing it, if you're doing it over the summer, the summer can be quite quiet. A lot of people go away, so that's gonna be a bit longer. But so cash buyers, can be quite quick. Agree the price, contracts, done in 3 months. Mortgages, which, like I said, this would probably need another podcast, but few hoops to jump through. It can prolong the process.
And the last one I have is typically for a new development, and I know it's slightly different for everybody. But what's the typical staged payments for new developments? What can people kind of expect in terms of deposits? Blah 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 blah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's usually about 8 stage payments. Can be less, can be more, but I've personally found about 8. So it starts with a deposit, which anything from 2 to 5%. Now that deposit's held in escrow, so it not touched by the developer. It's in the notaire's account, so it's very much secure, and it's certainly not going anywhere. And then from that, once the development gets going, so it would be, say, 15% once the foundations are in, and another 10% first floor, 15% second, and 15% windows, etc., right up until the end. And it's the last 5%, which is snagging. So once the snagging's been done by an independent, and they've agreed that everything's as it should be, then you are given the okay, you're clear to pay that final 5% where you get your keys, and then the property's yours.
Yeah. James, I've just sort of one more question, and I know anyone that's listening are probably going to be pleased that I asked it. I don't know you're going to have a right answer or not, but this is obviously to do with costs, because it could have costs in terms of penalties. But how do you recommend in terms of trusted developers in order to get the developments complete? If people are paying 5% as a down payment and then through the stage payments, what's the assurances that the developers will complete to the end, and you don't have, maybe it's slightly different in France, but you don't have buildings that are waiting for sales for money to come in, etc., etc. How do you kind of look into that?
Yeah, no, that is a really good question. So in France, well, 2 parts to it. First of all, the developers we work with are tried and trusted developers we've worked with either before or have been around for a number of years, and they're recommended to us by different partnerships we have in the French Alps. So we're always working with guys we know who have a pedigree and a track record. Secondly, so any new build property or development has to sell roughly 50% of their units before they can legally start the development. So 99% of all new build developments are banked finance. So once they've sold 50% of plan, then the bank can legally release the funds, to build their development. And then there's, as it goes up, they release more funds, and then you release more funds of your own funds as you go along. Now, if anything happened to that developer over that process, no matter when it was, the bank has a legal obligation to finish the development to the exact same plans and specification that agreed at the planning process. So, halfway through the development, for whatever reason, the developer goes bust. Then you don't have these developments that you sadly see across Spain or Greece that are just half finished, sitting
or
there.
Asia, where I am.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Always a blossom in the landscape and sad to see. Yeah. Don't get that in France because and this happened over the financial crash. When was that? Goodness, 15 plus years ago now. So funny, longer than that now. Yeah. So there are a lot of Dutch banks were financing the French developments, and they ended up owning a number of these developments, which they had to finish themselves. Hasn't happened on that scale, obviously, anymore. Hasn't happened with me at all over 10, 12 years. So, but anyway, that's the reassurance you have that, you know, your money is secure, A, held in escrow, B, it's you're not going to lose your shirt if the developer goes bust. The development is very much going to be finished once they've got boots on the ground and space in the earth.
Yeah, now I've got so many more questions. Maybe we don't go down this road. I'll just do one more. Would there be any advantage then to a buyer for inquiring with you into what if they're one of the first buyers into the development in order to get the cash flow started?
That's a good one, because look, any development you want to be in early. Obviously, you know, one, you get the pick of the apartments, and then, you know, secondly, not always, but, you know, and this is obviously the discretion of the developer and who they are, but they want to get it going for sure. Yeah. So you would tend to get a better deal if you're coming in early, you get it rolling, and you know, okay, this is selling, you want to get in quickly, and you know, we're off on a roll, rather than coming in later on and it's like, well, you know, we've got so many buyers here, we know we're going to hit 50% plus, and so, you know, the price is the price, and you know, who knows.
I guess the disadvantage to that is you need to have a little bit of patience to do it, because obviously you have to wait for the 50% of the buyers to come in before the build starts, and that might be very quick, or it might take a little bit longer. Yeah,
exactly. But I guess that's it. So the later you get in, the quicker you'll get your property, but the earlier, you know, the payoff is you have the better apartment. Potentially. Yeah.
James, thank you so much. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you another 100 questions, because my real estate mind will start going into overdrive. Thank you very much for answering the questions. I'm sure people will listen carefully to what you have to say. I will put your details onto the links if anyone wants to contact James. Quick pitch, James. Have you got any new developments? Any good ones that are worth considering?
Yeah, sure. So we've just we've got a new development in Champignon-Vanois called La Valoise, which, you know, I like these areas. They take advantage of the whole of the Paradis ski area, but it's, you know, it's not part of the main bit, so you get more, you know, you get more for your buck. We've got a resale, funnily enough, in Morzine, right in the center, which is a fantastic apartment. And, you know, if you like Morzine, then this is a 3-bed cabin, actually. So you can sleep quite a lot of people. Then that's definitely worth a look. And then a slightly different Dumark in the south of France. We're launching new developments all the time down the Côte d'Azur. So, lots going on. It's a buoyant market, and things seem to be really picking up.
Okay, for anyone that's listening, I will put James's contact details in. Feel free to contact him and ask him any questions or find out about all the new developments. But James, thank you very much for your time and answering all the questions that we have. Really appreciate it. Take care.
You too. Thanks, Mark. Cheers.
Cheers.